let's talk about Yom Kippur.
Welcome to The Big Puzzle. In this podcast, we explore the subtle connections between science, religion, politics, economics, and history. One piece at a time, we unveil the big picture of this shared experience that we call life.
We talked already about Pesach, Passover, and what it meant, where it came from, and what actually people do during Pesach. But there was another big celebration, probably the biggest of all the celebrations that the Israelites had. It was Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur was celebrated 6 months after Pesach, so that was in the month of Tishrei. That's the 7th month in the Israeli calendar, and Yom means day, and Kippur comes from the word kafar, that it has several meanings. So we use atonement to describe the Day of Atonement, but it also means to cover. To cover what? Well, to cover sins, because that was the celebration where the people would confess their sins for the whole year, and the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, if I recall correctly, the big priest, was the one who would atone through sacrifices and through a ritual in the tabernacle and later the temple for those sins, so that God would forgive those sins. So if Pesach was a private celebration, mostly a home center reunion around that dinner, this was most of a public event. People would prepare by fasting, and all the eyes would be centered in the high priest and the temple, where things would happen. And what would happen during that day? Well, the high priest would start the day by washing himself to become as clean as possible, putting some white robes that would symbolize, purity and also being humble. And after he did that, he started by offering sacrifices for his own sins and his household. So he knew that he couldn't represent the people, being himself impure. So he had to start by, being cleansed from his own sins. And he did that by sacrificing a bull. And with that bull, he would take the blood of the bull, and he would go inside of the temple, of the tabernacle. And the tabernacle and the temple, it has different sections. So the outer part was the courtyard, and some of the things, the cleansing and all those things happened there. Then you have the holy place, where you have the incense altar, then the menorah on your left, and then the table for the bread of proposition on the right. And not everybody could go in there, right? But then after that, and behind the veil, behind the incense altar, you had the Holy of Holies, and that is where God said that would manifest himself. So that's where, when they had the Ark of the Covenant, and it was the most sacred place. And only the high priest could go there, and only in occasions, like Yom Kippur, to do very specific things. So what he did was two things with the bull. First, he would go and take some incense and burn it there. And remember, incense and the smoke represented prayers. So these prayers would, like the smoke would go up to heaven. And also the Lord said that that smoke in the Holy of Holies would kind of cover his presence so the high priest could endure his presence. So it was very, very symbolic. But that idea of going and praying before God, directly before God. The other one was that he would take the cup with blood and he would sprinkle the blood, right? And again, think about these droplets of blood, right? Of an innocent animal that was sacrificed for the people, and this blood that was shed, for the people. So after he did that, he would do the offering for the sins of the people, and that involved 2 rams, 2 goats, right? And they would cast lots on the goats, and one of them would be called for the Lord, and the other one would be called for Azazel. And the one that would be called for the Lord would be sacrificed, and again his blood would be taken again into the Holy of Holies by the high priest, and again droplets of blood would be sprinkled on the Ark of the Covenant. And the other goat is what we call, well, the Lord called it the scapegoat. And the scapegoat had a different symbolism. The scapegoat would, so the high priest, Aaron initially, but then the high priest would put his hands on the head of the goat and would declare all the sins of the children of Israel. Symbolically, he would put in all the sins in that innocent creature. Then that animal would be taken outside of the walls of the city and led to the wilderness. The whole idea is that that animal carrying the sins would take them away in a way that would be very difficult for the sins to come back to the people. But still, I think there's some symbolism in that the goat might find its way back, so the sins might come back. So they would take him far away in the wilderness. Well, eventually they decided to kill it. That was not something that, was in what the Lord asked for, but, probably to make sure that the goat wouldn't return with their sins, they would throw the goat out of a cliff so he would die. And through time, we have the Torah, that is basically what the Lord said, the 5 books of the five first books of Moses, or the 5 books of Moses, the first 5 books in the Bible. But then we have the Talmud, and the Talmud is basically the traditions, right, around those things. And in the Talmud, we know that they added some stuff, but it was also something that it was common to do during Yom Kippur, was for the high priest to say a prayer. And in that prayer was an intercessory prayer, for the people. And, initially they only asked for rain, but then they added more stuff, and it kind of, it was this discussion about with all the, their teachers or scribes, or I don't know who, about, or the rabbis, to, okay, how much should they say it was good to add stuff or not, and so on. But keep that idea of the intercessory prayer, where the high priest would stand in front of the people and pray to God for them. Some people say that actually that happened inside of the Holy of Holies. In that case, I don't know how much people would hear from that, but apparently they did hear, because if not, how would they criticize what the high priest did, right? So apparently they, even if it was inside of the Holy of Holies, they could hear what he was saying. Another interesting tradition that they added was they tied a rope to the ankle of the high priest when the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies. Why? Because if he was not accepted by the Lord might kill him, and since nobody else could go in, they needed a way to retrieve the corpse of the high priest from the Holy of Holies. So there's no record when the high priest was killed, and that method had to be used. But again, shows how fearful they were about, not being accepted by the Lord. For me, even though this could be, another piece of the puzzle, and we might cover it, but for me this connects with when Paul said that to go boldly to the throne of God. The high priest and the Israelites were not going boldly towards God. They were always afraid of the Lord. Remember, when the Lord invited them to join Moses in the mountain, and he would talk directly to the people, and they didn't want to. Well, they were very, very afraid. They never understood that relationship, that father-son relationship that they had to develop with God. But again, so those were, then, going back to Yom Kippur, after that, the priest would go back to his other clothes, and that would signify kind of the end of the ceremony. And Yom Kippur, if Pesach was about physical liberation from death, liberation from the Egyptians, liberation from slavery, from physical slavery, Yom Kippur was also about liberation, but it was about liberation from sin. It was a spiritual liberation. And those two main focuses throughout the year, being thankful for the Lord for the physical liberation, and then 6 months later for the spiritual liberation, kind of kept that duality and that balance that we all have to have, right, in our lives. Okay, so that was Yom Kippur. Why is that so important, and how does it relate to the Last Supper and the events around that, and especially why has an influence on Peter, James, and John falling asleep? Well, you have to wait until we connect all the pieces. So, okay, see you tomorrow.